Hey there, my name's Curtis Lucas and you're watching Empire Building. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about market disruptors and what it means to invest in them. I'm sure you all heard of tulip mania. These days, the term is used as a metaphor to describe any rapid increase in an asset's price. These economic bubbles are common among market disruptors. And yes, believe it or not, the tulip was a market disruptor. But the truth of the tulip bubble is far more complicated than you've been led to believe. And it can teach us a great deal about market disruptors and what happens after a bubble. Looking back, it's easy to question why people would get so excited about a flower that it would trade at the same value as a mansion villa. In the early 1600s, people in Europe had never seen a tulip before. It is believed that the first tulips were transported to Europe from Turkey. With its saturated petal color, it quickly grew in popularity. In order to propagate tulips in mass, the seeds needed to be cultivated, and to cultivate a seed into a mature bulb took several years. The plants would enter their dormant phase between the months of June and September. During that time, they could be uprooted, sorted, and traded. During the rest of the time, the plants remained in the ground until trading could resume. This led to the realization that growers could enter into a contract with a potential buyer of a bulb while the bulb was still in the ground. That contract would give the buyer ownership of the bulb when the plant could be uprooted again. This became the world's first futures market. This also meant that now these contracts could be traded instead of the bulbs themselves all year long. Growers began to experiment with cultivating new species, creating some new and rare species like the Semper Augustus, of which at one point there were only 12. With all the plants still in the ground, the demand for these contracts skyrocketed. At the peak, these contracts changed hands 10 times a day. We all know what happened next. Prices plummeted, and fortunes were both made and lost. Today, this is used as a cautionary tale to ward off people from investing in ballooning asset prices. But there was another consequence of tulip mania. Money poured in from all over, and that led to actual innovation. Today, the Netherlands produces 77% of the supply of flower bulbs worldwide, not just tulips. They hold a 44% share of all floriculture products sold worldwide. This would not have been made possible without the tulip bubble. Bubbles are a necessary component of disruption. While it is true that it can lead to the ruin of countless speculators, some of the capital that is raised goes into building the necessary infrastructure that helps transform the future. Without the dot-com bubble, we would not have an internet as it exists today, where you can hit the like button and subscribe and help out a new content creator like myself. Thanks, I really appreciate it. So what does it mean to invest in disruption? Well, the disruptor needs to bring something new to the table, something that is different from the incumbent's product, sometimes radically different. It is important to recognize that in order to benefit from investing in a disruptive technology, you need to be an early adopter. How do you know if you're an early adopter? Well, just look around. If the mainstream is saying that this is all a fad and that the public isn't ready for this technology, then you're an early adopter. If the mainstream is now on board with this technology, then you're too late. Now comes the hard part about being an early adopter. You've done your research and you understand everything that there is to know about this technology and why it will change the world. The information is out there, so it must already be priced in, right? This is both your blessing and your curse. The information is available to anyone who chooses to look for it. I can honestly say that there have been no new information about Tesla in the last 3 months that would justify the move that it's made that we didn't already know a full year ago. Except that it was only the early adopters that were paying attention, not the mainstream. Once the price began to rise, the mainstream began reporting on old data like it was breaking news. This just in, Tesla has a battery cost advantage.
Not to that exclusive data. It has to do with the battery costs for Tesla and other automakers as they're building electric vehicles.
I'm glad you're here to tell us these things.
You don't want to make the mistake of selling your early position to make a paltry 100 or 200% gain, and then sit on the sidelines only to watch it skyrocket from there. There are countless stories out there of people who sold their Bitcoin stash at $50 a coin, feeling like geniuses at the time, only to get left behind while they waited for the price to pull back. Investing in disruptive technologies requires nerves of steel, as much if not more than the ability to identify the disruptive nature in the first place. While it may be true that Tesla is in a bubble now, that does not mean that the company cannot grow into that bubble and then balloon again. This has happened over and over again since its inception. Now, I want to take a moment to add a little side note that I'm not comparing Tesla and cryptocurrency to the Tulip Bubble. The Tulip Bubble resulted in a horrific crash where prices collapsed and never did recover to this day. The difference between that and bubbles like Tesla and cryptocurrency is the asset. People were purchasing the bulb itself, which is clearly overvalued. And it makes sense that the price never returned. It would have been a different story altogether if they had invested in the growers themselves. No one ever talks about those investors, and they became the true winners after that bubble. Another reason I told that story is to point out that tulip mania is just a metaphor, and you cannot simply apply that case to all bubbles. Every one is a little different. I mean, when dealing with a flower, it is by nature a short-term investment. That much should be obvious. Electric autonomous vehicles and blockchain technology are investments that by definition require a long-term outlook. Tesla is well on its way and has plenty of room to move, but blockchain technologies like Ethereum are still hilariously undervalued at the moment. An important metric for understanding the potential future value of a disruptive asset is to look at the value of the addressable market. This is a difficult thing to do for Tesla because they are open to disrupt so many different ventures. From the obvious, transportation and energy, autonomous driving, and insurance. You add it all up and assign a potential market share to Tesla, and you have a potential future value for the company. Very difficult to do accurately, but it does paint a pretty clear picture that the value could be far more than it is now. To do the same thing to Ethereum would be impossible. If you think about it, it's hard to imagine a market that couldn't be disrupted by Ethereum. And assigning a future value to that is impossible because we still have no idea what it could become. We only know that it could stand to impact everything. The last bubble saw billions of dollars flood into the space, and then people went to work on all the things that made everyone so excited in the first place. Today, many of those applications have begun to take shape. This has happened in wide open view of the public. The mainstream haven't been paying attention, but the men and women behind the technology have been busy building this entire time, while the mainstream can only seem to focus on the price. For Ethereum, it's even worse, because Bitcoin is the only one the media seems to know how to talk about. Once the price approaches new highs, the mainstream will begin regurgitating old data like it was breaking news, and then new people will enter the space, driving the price even higher. The signal you want to watch for is the phrase, "This time it's different." It will be used over and over again like a bad punchline. That will be the beginning of the massive move up. I need to stress that this is not investment advice. Apparently, people need to be reminded to do their own research and make their own investment decisions. So don't go remortgaging your house to buy Tesla and Ethereum because some guy on YouTube told you to. Do, however, hit that like button and subscribe because I said so. The most important thing is that you realize that we are nowhere near mass adoption yet. We're not even at moderate adoption. The bulk of cryptocurrency users still only trade with each other. They're not actually using the technology for what it was intended. Once that starts, I think even the earliest adopters will be completely surprised and caught off guard by what happens next. If you're still listening, then thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Leave a comment down below and let me know what you thought of the video. Are you already invested in any of the disruptions I just mentioned? How big do you see this getting? That's all for this one. Now let's get back to empire building.